It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. White men applying for RAF positions are described as useless. Sky News sees emails exposing the pressure on recruiters to push for diversity. ITV orders an external review into Philip Schofield's departure from this morning. Worse than Chernobyl, workers at a Russian-occupied power plant in Ukraine tell Sky News it's a nuclear catastrophe waiting to happen. Running out of time, Boris Johnson demands the government disclose his WhatsApps and notebooks to the COVID inquiry ahead of a deadline tomorrow.
So are you going to watch us? Yeah!
The Golden Generation inspiring the next. England named their squad for the Women's World Cup. The interest rate time bomb that's seen some mortgage payments doubling and cheaper products removed from the market. Plus, a new drive to stop all of us being rubbish at recycling. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. A very good evening. Sky News has seen leaked emails to RAF recruiters describing white men seeking to join the Air Force as useless white males. The emails, which expose the pressure to boost diversity in the RAF, revealed that a number of selection boards to find new recruits were cancelled if they did not include women or people from ethnically diverse backgrounds. Defence sources say the revelations appear to contradict assurances from the outgoing head of the Air Force, who's insisted that efforts to improve diversity did not discriminate against white men. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes reports.
British air power in Russia's backyard. These Typhoon jets patrol Estonia's skies on a mission to deter aggression. But back on the ground, anger is growing with the head of the Royal Air Force over a botched recruitment drive that's damaged morale and could have impacted capability. Sky News has seen emails exposing the pressure put on RAF recruitment officers to attract more women and ethnic minorities. One email dated the 19th of January 2021 from a squadron leader talked about selection boards for new recruits, saying they'd been predominantly white male heavy. I don't really need to see loads of useless white male pilots. Selection boards are how the RAF chooses candidates to start training courses and are a vital process to maintain the force's fighting strength. But another email dated the 20th of January 2021 revealed, "We've cancelled 2 boards next week due to them having no female, black, Asian and minority ethnic or priority branch on them." I've also been told by a source and via a Freedom of Information request that at least one white man officially complained he'd been unfairly disadvantaged by this kind of recruitment policy. As a white male, he'd been held back from joining a cyber training programme and missed out on a £5,000 bonus. The RAF has since found 30 other white men in a similar position. My source says they're all being paid £5,000 and there could be many other white men also impacted. Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston denied any discrimination when he gave evidence to MPs in February. But the head of the Defence Committee isn't convinced and is waiting for the findings of an inquiry into the crisis.
On the face of it, it does look like the committee was misled. When the report comes out, I will seek guidance from my committee and invite Air Marshal Wigston back into the committee to answer questions, and we will put this very, very issue to him.
The inquiry was launched after the resignation of Group Captain Elizabeth Nicholl, who took charge of recruitment in March 2021. Sky News exclusively revealed she then quit last year in protest at what she deemed to be an unlawful order to discriminate against white men. Sky's Kay Burley then challenged the RAF boss.
And in any way, do you feel that safety was compromised by the fact that ethnic minorities and women, if I may finish the question, were favoured over others?
Yeah. Okay, there was absolutely no drop in operational standards, no drop in any standards. There was no discrimination against any group.
The RAF insists it will continue to do everything possible to increase recruiting from underrepresented groups within the provisions of the law. At a ceremony this week, the head of the Air Force will hand over this goal to his successor, along with lots of difficult questions.
And Deborah joins us now live. Evening to you, Deborah. What is all this going to mean for the new incoming head of the Air Force?
Well, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, who will be taking over from Mike Wigston, is going to be wanting surely to distance himself from the controversy that surrounded his predecessor. But the fact is, he's been very aware of the incident that happened that led the group captain Elizabeth Nichol to resign last year. I've been told, in fact, that his office has been overseeing these payments to these 31 white men that were found to have been disadvantaged by the policies of the RAF when it comes to recruitment. This inquiry into the resignation is ongoing. It will complete. It will be published. And if it is found that the RAF did break the law with its recruitment practices or did act in any way unfairly, then people will have to be held to account. And that's all going to happen on his watch right at the very beginning.
OK, Deborah, thanks very much. After days of pressure, ITV this evening took action to reduce the fallout from Philip Schofield's departure from the channel's flagship This Morning show. A barrister has been instructed to carry out an external review of the facts after the presenter admitted to having an affair with a young male colleague. Well, Sky's Adele Robinson joins me in the studio. Good to see you, Adele. It's taken a while for ITV to make this sort of announcement that they're going to have this external review. What do you make of that? And is this damage control now?
Yeah, well, yes, it is, because this has become a huge reputational image for ITV, hasn't it? I mean, it's become apparent that as the days have gone by, as statements and comments have been released both officially and unofficially, that ITV really needed to do something about this, to try to bring the situation under control, to try to manage it. And this letter is an attempt to do just that. Not only does it announce the fact of an external review, what it also does is highlight some extra detail of the timeline of who knew what and when. Now, ITV have said in this letter that the rumours of a relationship between Philip Schofield and his younger, more junior colleague emerged first in 2019, early 2020. It was investigated. Both parties, it says in this letter, categorically and repeatedly denied that relationship. I'll read a little excerpt from the letter for you now. It says, the ITV employee was aged 19 when he first did work experience at This Morning in 2015 and 20 years old when he applied and succeeded in securing a job as a runner on the show. He subsequently applied for and was successful in securing a promotion to Loose Women in 2019. He left ITV in 2021. And it goes on, as you would imagine, given the social media scrutiny of him, we have offered him our support throughout this period and indeed are still doing so. Now, ITV in the letter said that it found no evidence of a relationship at the time, despite the rumour and the hearsay. And it describes its approach towards this as reasonable and proportionate, but there's no doubt about it. The damage to the ITV brand is undeniable, and there's no end to this at the moment for the foreseeable, because not only do we now have this external review pending, remember that ITV bosses are going before MPs on Tuesday.
Yeah, certainly it's far from over for ITV. Adele, thanks so much. To the war in Ukraine now, and stark warnings over the safety of a nuclear power plant occupied by Russian forces. Recently, we've seen residential areas become the target of drone attacks in both Ukraine and Russia. But there are now concerns that once again, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear site in Ukraine is becoming a focus for the conflict. Sky News has spoken to 2 employees at the site who've revealed a shortage of qualified staff and an increase in military activity. They say it's a nuclear catastrophe waiting to happen. Both men still work at the Zaporizhia plant and have been speaking to our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who sent this report from southeastern Ukraine.
Standing on the Dnipro River in Russian-occupied Ukraine, it's Europe's largest nuclear power station. And it's on the front line of a war that is getting worse. And according to two workers who spoke to us on condition of anonymity and at great personal risk, it is a nuclear catastrophe waiting to happen.
If we are talking about the worst scenario, at a minimum it impacts half of Europe, half of Russia and a huge part of the Mediterranean. The level of radioactive pollution and, most importantly, the area of contamination will be thousands of square kilometres of land and sea. It would be much, much worse than Fukushima and worse than Chernobyl.
These grainy images show Russian forces storming the plants last year. Since then, satellite imagery shows the damage caused by shelling, with each side blaming the other. The workers told us Russia's deliberately targeted power lines to cut the supply of electricity to Ukraine. These lines are essential for plant safety. Basic maintenance is also not getting done.
For repairs, who can actually do the servicing and fix problems, the quality of the workers is lower because the qualified staff left. So generally the situation here is deteriorating.
There are also fears Moscow may escalate the conflict by staging a false flag attack. Ukraine accuses the Kremlin of nuclear terrorism.
Regarding the consequences, as with Chernobyl, it all depends on what the Russians do. If they are going to do it deliberately, if they have such a goal, for example, to blow something up, that could result in disaster. They can do it. We don't know their goals.
The power station has been under occupation for the last 15 months. Now, workers are telling us that in the last few weeks, military activity inside has dramatically increased. They've witnessed Russian soldiers moving in more armour, guns and ammunition as they fortify their positions.
In August last year, Russian military hardware was filmed moving into the plant. There's now more evidence the power station is being used as a base ahead of Ukraine's counter-offensive.
Ukrainian armed forces will not shell the station. That's why they are multiplying the numbers of troops and vehicles here. The thing is, 1 month and a half ago, there were 2 times fewer troops on the power station. And now there are 2 times more, which means they are definitely preparing for the counter-offensive.
Russia denies it's compromising safety, but the UK Ministry of Defence says these are sandbagged fighting positions on the rooftops of nuclear reactors. It is hard to know what is exactly going on inside. We understand technicians are routinely intimidated to keep their silence.
Everyone has their own story, and I think the most important thing is not to get into their hands, because it's unlikely you will get out and still be the human you were when you went in.
The International Atomic Energy Agency continues to express grave concerns about the nuclear plants and is calling for the area to be demilitarised immediately. There is no sign that will happen. In fact, quite the opposite. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Zaporizhia region.
A spokesman for Boris Johnson said this evening all materials requested by the COVID inquiry, including his diaries and notebooks, have been passed to the Cabinet Office and should be urgently disclosed to the inquiry. It sets the scene for a potential showdown tomorrow between the inquiry's chair, Lady Hallett, and the Cabinet Office, even though they risk criminal proceedings if they choose to defy her request. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is at Downing Street for us. Certainly pressure mounting on the government, John, to hand over this material, and they have until tomorrow afternoon.
4 o'clock deadline, that's right. The Prime Minister's actually off to a summit in Moldova tomorrow, so he really needs to get this sorted before he goes. And we all know that Boris Johnson likes a game of tennis. Well, the former Prime Minister has certainly put the ball in Rishi Sunak's court tonight with this challenge, really. Publish and be damned, if you like. So in his announcement, Boris Johnson said that he's handed over WhatsApps, notebooks, and they are in full and unredacted. funded. And he's also said in a threat, what sounds like a threat, if the government doesn't hand over the material to the inquiry, he will. Now, he does say that the Cabinet Office has had access to his material for several months. Now, that's not the same as possession. The access, what that means is that, of course, when he was using solicitors provided by the Cabinet Office, they had the material, but of course he sacked them last week in the row over handing over material to the police. So this is all getting quite acrimonious. There are those who in government who think that Boris Johnson is trying to settle a few scores with Rishi Sunak, but the pressure really is on the current Prime Minister tonight to hand over the material or face a legal battle. And there are, although the government's lawyers believe the government could win, there are plenty who think the government could suffer the humiliation of going to court and losing a legal battle. It's that serious.
OK, John, thanks very much. The England squad for the 2023 Women's World Cup has been announced. The 23 women group will head to Australia and New Zealand in July, hoping to repeat the Lionesses' success in last year's European Championships. Expectations are high, but the women's national team is also beset with some familiar political challenges. Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, has more.
Well, you're a lucky one.
She's now chosen the lucky ones for the World Cup.
So are you going to watch us? Yes! Oh, that would be nice.
By winning the Euros for the Lionesses, Serena Wiegmann has raised expectations.
We all have a dream, and of course we go there to get the highest level we can and to get as far as possible.
England want to experience this again, but this time without Euro 2022's top scorer Beth Mead. An ACL injury made the striker too risky a selection for the 23 flying to Australia. Ligament damage also denied Wiegmann her captain, Leah Williamson. How much of a concern is it, the number of ACL injuries, particularly in the women's game?
Well, I think we should see the bigger picture in that. And every ACL that occurs, you need to have a look at that individual too, and also what's happened in the pathway in the academies, the scheduling, daily schedules, the support for the players. I think it's a bigger picture, and yes, it needs more research.
Injuries present opportunities. Goals have earned Bethany England a squad recall for the first time since last year. And the captain's armband will be worn by Millie Bright, who knows all about lifting trophies. But will this armband be allowed after the LGBTQ plus activism was blocked at the World Cup in Qatar? And do you hope FIFA will approve Millie Bright to wear the One Love armband and approve it long before the tournament begins?
I think the FIFA wants to solve it too, and I trust them in that. And I hope, and I think it's going to be solved before we start the tournament.
This tournament will feature Lauren James and Jess Carter as England's only black players. Do you hope this tournament encourages a greater diversity of players to take up the game and actually become part of the sort of wider pathway into ultimately the Lionesses squad?
I think we have set some things in place, but it doesn't change overnight. It takes a little more time. I think what the players did with sending that letter and now reached like access for girls in football in schools, that will help too. But then it's not solved for tomorrow. And yes, we hope every game, so also this World Cup, will inspire people, whoever you are, to come and play football.
Do you hope this will be the last World Cup without equal prize money?
Well, I hope that things are being done in the right way, and that is equality. And yeah, that's what I hope for, and I think we're moving forward. So now we're really getting ready for the World Cup.
Ready with a squad to handle the pressure, ready to take on the world. Rob Harris, Sky News, Sutton Coldfield.
The Bank of England's mission to get inflation down could soon mean a further interest rate rise, and this could spell ruin for many with mortgages already struggling with the cost of basic essentials. People whose fixed-rate deals are coming to an end and those with variable rates are facing massively inflated costs. Our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, reports.
The worst should have been behind us by now. But interest rates are continuing on their seemingly endless upward march. And for mortgage holders like Ahmet, it means more misery.
It was about 790 per month, and it's up to 1,400, nearly 1,450 now.
Where are you finding the extra money?
It's basically the extra hours we work. You know, we're on a contract, and obviously we work outside of our contract, doing extra hours.
How many hours a week do you work now?
Well, we're on a 39-hour contract, and we're probably doing double that, maybe more. You know, surely if you're working hard, and you should be sort of reaping the rewards and having a certain standard of living, and it's just not happening.
Ahmet is not alone. Across the country, lenders are hiking mortgage rates in response to growing expectations that the Bank of England will continue to raise interest rates because inflation is not coming down fast enough. They've also been pulling products from the market.
A lot of these lenders may well be temporarily withdrawing their ranges, but we are urging borrowers to obviously have a look at what deal you have right now, see with your broker if you can refinance, because a lot of lenders are pulling fixed rate deals.
The latest data from the mortgage market shows that average 2- and 5-year fixed rate mortgages are both now above 5%. They're approaching levels last seen in the autumn, at the time of the mini budget. That means for the average household looking for a 2-year fixed-rate mortgage, repayments have gone up by more than £340 in the last 18 months.
And they could go even higher. It's an unpalatable reality, but when you combine it with soaring food and broadband bills as well as rising taxes, it very quickly becomes unbearable.
Many households are already running down their savings and are desperately hoping that things start to improve.
In the coming months, we should see food price inflation slowing down to some degree. And if that adds up to signs that inflation is becoming less sticky, that will mean that the Bank of England doesn't have to raise rates by as much to slow the economy and bring inflation under control.
And that could mean mortgage rates peak at a lower level. Households will certainly be hoping this is the case, because many cannot afford for things to get much worse. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
The former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, plans to announce he's running for president in 2024 at an event in Iowa next Wednesday. The former Indiana governor, who served as Donald Trump's deputy, will be running against his former boss for the nomination, as well as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the former US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. Despite serving alongside Trump, the former president criticised Pence for certifying Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 presidential election, claiming he didn't have the courage to protect the Constitution. And in Congress tonight, US politicians are holding a crucial vote on whether to allow the Treasury to borrow more money to cover government spending. If they fail to pass the bipartisan bill, the US could default on government loan repayments with potentially disastrous consequences for the global economy. The deadline is Monday. A NASA panel studying unidentified anomalous phenomena, better known as UFOs, held its first public discussion today ahead of a full report due later this summer. During the session, a Pentagon official revealed for the first time that the UK is involved in international UFO data sharing as part of the Five Eyes intelligence group. And the panel chair used his presentation to explain how a reluctance to report sightings of mysterious objects creates a major challenge for researchers.
There's a real stigma among people reporting events. And despite NASA's extensive efforts to reduce this stigma, the origin of the UAPs remain unclear, and we feel many events remain unreported.
Now, new census data has given us a rich portrait of Britain at work, highlighting jobs dominated by older workers and those with persistent gender imbalances. But there may be change afoot, in some areas at least. Our data and economics correspondent Tom Cheshire has the details.
This is a portrait of England and Wales at work. 27.8 million of us, the sorts of jobs we do, the sort of economy we are, and how all that is changing. Now, by far the most common job in England and Wales is a sales or retail assistant. 1.1 million people, 4% of the working population in that sector. More than 850,000 people in the care sector. Third most common profession is a cleaner or domestic assistant. Now, some jobs skew older. We can have a look at the demographics. This is about people who are older than 65. And the highest proportion is in elected representatives. So think of the few hundred MPs and in particular thousands of councillors. followed by farmers and exam invigilators. You need wisdom for that. And the data shows us how the world of work is changing as well. The traditional industry, like working as a typist, has a much older workforce, 60.4% of people aged 50 or over. But if you look at the newer equivalent, this is data entry. So you can see this is a lot younger as a profession, a changing of the guard there. We can also break jobs down by gender. Now, some professions are heavily dominated by one gender. 97% of early education and childcare workers are women. Compare that to 99% of bricklayers, who are men, 98% of vehicle mechanics too, they're men, with constructions and manual trades skewing very male. But those gender splits aren't fixed in stone. They're changing too. 75% of science, research, engineering and technology occupations were men overall. But there are more women in engineering in younger age groups now. Half of female engineers are aged under 35. And you can see that, so that might be another changing of the guard. And other audiences, more female, such as chemistry and biology.
Sky's Tom Cheshire there. Now, are you guilty of wish cycling? This is the act of desperately trying to be a good recycler, but getting it wrong, leading to potentially whole batches of waste being ruined. The government is going to ask people to be more careful in what they recycle, but as Ashna Horinag found out, that's easier said than done.
Just when you think you're saving the planet, a staggering 84% of us are doing the opposite.
It's dry and mixed recycling, cardboard, paper, tins, glass, simple type of things we use every single day.
Hidden in this mountain of waste are items that are so-called contaminated, too soggy, too greasy, or just downright wrong.
Paper, cardboard, plastic, bottles, it doesn't say wood.
Fishing them out adds extra cost, or sometimes writes off an entire batch of recycling.
Sometimes it can be an entire load that comes in where 8 or 9 tonnes is rejected immediately. The smaller bits we can't pick out. Smaller stuff, those coffee cups, those contaminated bits of cardboard, etc. That we can't really segregate. If we see it, we pull it out. Our job in the main is the larger quantities where there's food waste, nappies, that type of thing, and we get quite a lot of it.
Misplaced items include crisp packets, juice cartons, soft plastic bags, wet cardboard and toothpaste tubes, which all require specialist recycling. It's why households in England will get updated guidance from the government to clear up the mess that's largely been caused by confusion rather than ignorance.
Definitely with that, question mark with that, and no to that.
Would it surprise you that if the pizza box had grease stains on it, you wouldn't be able to recycle it?
That does surprise me, gosh.
I didn't know if they had grease stains in it, we can't recycle that.
I would just make it into an aeroplane.
Well, now, when I go home, I'm going to think, should I or shouldn't I?
Misguided recyclers do need a helping hand, though, with labelling often causing a headache for both depots and households.
The responsibility lies with everyone, so I think from a government perspective there needs to be make sure there's clear legislation and guidelines to make sure that recycling is as easy as possible. But at the end of the day, the final behaviour is down to households and consumers to make sure that they are putting it into the right bin.
Recycling was once a trend and is now the norm. With new guidance, it's hoped for many more it'll become a habit. Ashna Horinag, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview, including this story. On the front of the Eye, their headline, humiliated ITV, forced to order Schofield inquiry. We'll certainly be talking about that. And tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Sarah Vine, standing by there for us. Join us after this short break. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sky News has seen leaked emails to RAF recruiters describing white men seeking to join the Air Force as useless white males. ITV has announced there will be an external review into Philip Schofield's departure, but has defended its investigation into the former This Morning presenter's affair with a younger male colleague. And the Cabinet Office has confirmed the WhatsApp messages and notebooks requested by the COVID inquiry from Boris Johnson have been handed over to them ahead of tomorrow's deadline to disclose them to the inquiry. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Sarah Vine. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. We'll speak to both of them in just a moment. But first, let's see what's on some of those front pages. The Mail describes ITV as humiliated at having to order an external inquiry into Philip Schofield's departure from This Morning. That story and allegations of a cover-up also lead the Mirror tomorrow. The Eye carries analysis claiming Labour's £20 billion raft of policy proposals would cost the equivalent of a 3p income tax increase to enact. Meanwhile, The Telegraph says Tory MPs are telling Rishi Sunak to scrap what they call unfair inheritance tax rules. The Metro reports that the former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has described senior British politicians as legitimate targets given their support for Ukraine. The Times reports that Rishi Sunak is soliciting help from Turkey and Bulgaria in his fight to stem the migrant small boats crisis. The Express reveals what it calls an eco-mob plot to disrupt the running of the famous horse race, the Derby. The Guardian hears from the vice-chancellors of several UK universities who believe that the way the higher education system is funded is broken. The FT tells us why soda ash, which is used to make glass, could soon be worth billions on the stock market. The Sun leads with a story about Prince Harry, the fact that we haven't heard much from him recently. And The Star speaks to a Tudor historian who claims Henry VIII didn't necessarily deserve his bad reputation. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us. And we're joined tonight by Kevin Maguire and Sarah Vine. Let's kick off, shall we? Great to see you both. Thanks for joining us. Sarah, I'll kick off with you first, if I may. Front page of The Guardian, of course, one of those stories that broke today. Boris Johnson has handed over all of his WhatsApp messages.
Yes, so there's been a big sort of debate over the last few days about whether or not the unredacted 2 years' worth of unredacted WhatsApp messages between Boris Johnson and sort of, I think it's about 40 ministers, civil servants, various people should be handed to the COVID inquiry. The Cabinet Office, who are in charge of these things, say no, that actually a lot of this stuff is irrelevant and a lot of it is private. And the person in charge of the inquiry, whose name I temporarily forget, Baroness
Hallett.
Kevin will know.
Hallett.
Thank you.
Yes.
Says she'd like to see everything and she'll be the judge of that. So there's been this kind of ongoing row between the Cabinet Office and the COVID inquiry. And now I think what's happened is that Johnson himself has handed over a whole load of messages. Am I correct in that?
Oh, sorry, what was your question, Sarah? I didn't catch that.
I think Johnson himself has now handed over a whole load of messages.
Yeah, Boris Johnson has disclosed all of his WhatsApp messages today and notebooks and diaries and handed them over to the Cabinet Office. In fact, he was extremely cooperative in that statement that was released by his spokesperson. Kevin, what did you make of Boris Johnson's cooperation today? And, you know, seemingly it heaps a lot more pressure on the Cabinet Office to hand over all the material.
He did. He's made them look chumps. The ghost of Boris Johnson's returned to haunt Rishi Sunak and the cabinet ministers yet again. because he says urgently disclose Boris Johnson, give him the lot. Maybe he realises he hasn't got much of a reputation to lose anymore, that nothing can really be there any more damaging than we've seen. And Dominic Cummings disclosed some of his WhatsApp messages. I remember when they fell out spectacularly. Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages were made clear. But the Cabinet Office was in this ridiculous position where it said, well, we haven't got the messages, but there's nothing really in them anyway. Move along, please. Nothing to see here. But now Johnson's handed them over and said, pass them on. I think they'll have to climb down, pass them on. And Heather Hallett, the chair of the committee, will get her way, which the Guardian quotes William Ragg, a Tory MP who chairs the All-Party Constitutional Affairs Committee, say, look, the law is on her side anyway. The government set up the inquiry. She has a power to ask for whatever she wants. And Johnson appears to be playing ball, which I think is the right position, because he will be aware, I'm sure, that if Hallett went to court to demand the disclosure of these notebooks and WhatsApp messages, she would have won, and the Cabinet Office would have lost. So I think the Cabinet Office, with Oliver Dowden, the Cabinet Office Minister in the Cabinet there, Deputy Prime Minister, has lost and has egg on his face.
Sarah, I can see you nodding. Is there something you want to add there?
Well, I mean, there's no love lost between Oliver Dowden and Johnson, but also I think that Johnson's calculation is probably that because these messages will involve a lot of people, including Rishi Sunak, including Liz Truss, including Dominic Cummings, including Simon Case, that this, if they're disclosed, that it may help transfer some. It will give a bigger picture for him, but also it may take the heat slightly out of him, because they will inevitably have said things in the heat of the moment. It was a very difficult, feverish time, COVID. There were lots of rows and arguments going on. People were losing their temper and saying things off the cuff. So it will, it may actually be played to Johnson's favour to have these messages exposed. They will, of course, be leaked. I mean, it's almost inevitable that they will be leaked because everything is leaked. So we have to be prepared for that. That was possibly one of the reasons why the Cabinet Office was so reluctant to let the COVID inquiry have them in the first place, because inevitably they will come out into the open.
And certainly WhatsApp messages, people are perhaps a lot more casual in the way they use them. You're a bit more careful about what you put in an email. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Let's move on to the front page of the Eye, Kevin. Their analysis on their front page tomorrow shows that Labour's new policies would cost the same as a 3p hike in income tax. Your take on this?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the first of many stories on Labour's spending programme. Keir Starmer way ahead in the polls, wants to form the next government. Looks like he will be probably the next Prime Minister of our country. And I think it's legitimate and justifiable to begin scrutinising Labour's proposals. And the Eye reckon the spending plans so far on free childcare, foreign aid, school, breakfast and police total about £20 billion, which the Institute for Fiscal Studies say is equivalent of 3p on income tax. Doesn't mean income tax will go up 3p, but that's the equivalent. And Labour's tax proposals at the moment really end the non-dom loophole, I would call it, and put VAT on private school fees would raise about 5 billion. So that's a 15 billion gap. Now, Labour may dispute the figures, but we're going to get more and more scrutiny. Rachel Reeves, Pat McFadden and the Treasury team have been pretty strong on spending plans, and to the annoyance of many other shadow cabinet members who want to unveil goodies to be told they can't. But those they will have to show how they fund them. Labour often gets this tougher than the Tories, mainly because I suppose we've got Tory press or Tory-leaning press. But at the same time, I think it's quite legitimate that Labour comes into the spotlight as well.
Yeah, Sarah, a brief thought from you on this. I think we're going to see more and more scrutiny and crunching the numbers when it comes to Labour's promises ahead of the election. It's far easier being in opposition than it is being in power.
Yeah, and I think that's right. As Kevin says, it's important that we delve, we get into the weeds of this stuff. But I mean, the Tories have also got their financial woes. The other front pages that we've seen, this whole row about inheritance tax, the Vice-Chancellor's complaining that they haven't got enough money to run their universities. that, you know, money is a big problem for both parties, regardless of who's in power. And, you know, the Labour Party are going to have to come up with a really cogent plan to persuade the public that they can manage things better than the Tories. I mean, the Tories, you know, there are wider factors causing the financial problems. The FT has got a very interesting leader today about the issues in China and China's financial woes. The whole world, you know, Germany is in recession. The whole world has got money problems.
Yeah.
And navigating your way out of that is going to be difficult.
Yeah, certainly. There's not much to go round in the coffers, and that leads us neatly onto the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Kevin, on this very issue of inheritance tax. Rishi Sunak facing pressure to scrap it from his own MPs.
Yeah, they managed to get 50 or more than 50 MPs to say, Priti Patel, Nadeem Zawari, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I would say the usual suspects on the right of the Conservative Party to claim it's unfair. And they're launching a campaign. Now, basically, I think the unfairness with inheritance taxes isn't a lot higher. There's only 7% of estates actually pay it. 7% of what's that, about 1 in 14? An individual can leave $500,000 tax-free to people. That's really something for nothing. Couples £1 billion. So 7 billion is raised, which Jacob Rees-Mogg says is a modest amount. Well, what are you going to cut? How are you going to fund that 7 billion now? I think it should be higher. George Osborne did say he would raise it in 2007, and he helped derail a Labour general election then that Gordon Brown was contemplating. The 2010 Tory election manifesto said they'd raise the limit and didn't. If there are taxes to cut, it's not inheritance tax, because I think it's the fairest tax of all. Because look, shrouds have no pockets, you can't take it with you. Maybe graveyards are full of rich people, but it is a real welfare state. You get something for nothing if you inherit. The person who created that money is dead, they've gone. But you are getting something. You're very lucky if you do get something, but I really think you should pay tax on it.
And while we're on this discussion of funding, Kevin, let's get a thought from you, Sarah, if I may. On the front page of The Guardian, Vice-Chancellors warning that the funding model for UK universities is broken.
Can I just come back to Kevin on the inheritance tax thing very briefly, which is that the problem is that people, it's houses, it's people's houses. So people can buy a house for very little, and then because the property market in this country is so mad and so insane, they can find themselves sitting on a lot of money that is basically the amount of money that their house has gone up in value. So if you have these high thresholds, then what happens is people have to sell their houses. And quite often they're not people who are wealthy. They're people who've just bought a little house and now suddenly it's worth 5 times what it was worth. That's the difficulty. It's just the property market. Anyway, moving on, the Vice-Chancellors, they're bleating because apparently they haven't got enough money. Well, can I just say, quite a lot of Vice-Chancellors are paid an awful lot of money themselves. Some of them are on about £400,000 a year. Not only that, students are getting the most appalling value for money at the moment. They pay £9,000 a year for, as far as I can see, almost nothing. They're always lecturers are constantly on strike. You know, their accommodation costs a fortune. They're quite a lot. I mean, there's this whole row at the moment over some university finalists not being able to actually get their final results because they're not going to be marked before they graduate, which is insane. I think the whole university sector is in trouble, but I'm not entirely sure it's just to do with funding. I think it's to do with mismanagement and the fact that, you know, the Vice-Chancellors are not doing their job properly, which is not really just to sit around having nice dinners with subsidised wine. It's actually to sort of try and run these organisations properly. The problem also, they're cross because they're not going to get so many foreign students, which has been a huge source of money for universities. And, you know, that's possibly right because they've used foreign students as cash cows for so long. The whole thing is in a mess.
I'm sure Vice-Chancellors would dispute some of what you said there, Sarah, but certainly you make a good point. We'll give you both a breather and speak to you in just a moment. Coming up on the press preview, ITV orders an external inquiry into the circumstances surrounding Philip Schofield's departure. We'll be discussing that next. Stay with us.
the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview, and with me is Kevin Maguire and Sarah Vine to review the papers this evening. Let's kick off with your front page, Kevin. The Mirror leading on the Schofield row. Certainly really interesting what we learned today about ITV calling in an external review. And I thought it was quite interesting that we learned the chief executive, Dame Carolyn McCall, has said that there's been a lot of inaccuracy in recent reporting. Why do you think it's taken ITV so long to clarify that?
Well, I suspect they were hoping to bunker down and it would go away, and it hasn't, not least because a lot of aggrieved former presenters and so on are sharpening axes and settling scores, and it's captured a public imagination here. So they had no alternative, I believe, particularly given they'll be grilled next week by MPs, to get an inquiry going and getting a barrister is I think it's a smart move by ITV. Carolyn McCall is quoted on the front of the Mirror saying, "We feel badly let down because Schofield admitted that he lied." She said that as recently as a month ago, we've been told there was no affair, but clearly the internal inquiry in 2020, if that's when it was, didn't uncover the truth. And you set up an inquiry, it's not in the long grass, but you get some from the outside or go through all the records, presumably interview some people, and then we'll come up with conclusions. But the problem in the longer term is you can lose control of an inquiry. I remember Dominic Raab, Deputy Prime Minister, said he was happy to have a barrister investigate claims he'd been bullying civil servants. Well, found out he had been bullying civil servants and he lost his job. So there'll be some people sweating in ITV, undoubtedly.
Sarah, your thoughts on all of this? The Daily Mail also leading with this story tomorrow, describing ITV as humiliated on their front page and forced to order this inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just interesting the way the whole thing has unravelled. You know, remember Schofield coming out as gay and him being a hero and Holly hugging and all of that sort of stuff, and it's sort of spiraled into a sort of much darker story, really. And I think that it's about power in the workplace, isn't it? And it's about what people feel they can and cannot say, and it's about whether you can stand up to somebody if you think they're doing the wrong thing, if they're very superior to you. It's quite a human story in that respect. And there are lots of people in workplaces who maybe do see things that they're not comfortable with, but they're too scared to say anything because they don't want to lose their jobs, or because the person concerned is very senior. So there's that you know, and the thing about Schofield was that he was seemingly invincible. He was the guy, and nobody could say anything to him. And it does have echoes of past scandals of this nature. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see what happens. I always think inquiries are double-edged swords, as Kevin was saying, because, well, a lot of them are sort of, in a way for the people in charge who should have been responsible, sort of passing the buck. But also they don't always turn up the results that you want.
And of course, ITV bosses are likely to be quizzed by MPs on this scandal next week, Kevin. What do you make of politicians wading in?
Getting on their moral high horses, getting altitude sickness, given the state of Parliament and political parties. I mean, there's an amusing side, but at the same time, they also represent us. They are elected representatives. But ITV now go before that committee. It was a long-standing meeting. It wasn't about this, but of course it's going to crop up. They can now say there's an inquiry, and they can deflect questions to some extent. If there wasn't an inquiry by a barrister, they would have to answer more detailed questions. So it's the timing is very opposite for ITV, and I'm sure it's part of their thinking. Now, Carolyn McCall said in her letter which went to Ofcom, it went to the chair of the Culture Committee and the Culture Secretary, said they will share the findings of this report.
OK, sorry to wrap you there, Kevin. I thought you'd enjoy that question. See you both in a moment. Thanks very much. Let's have a look at the weather.